When adding fractions, we need to make sure, adding or subtracting fractions, we need to find the lowest common denominator of the fractions so that they can be converted to equivalent fractions with that common denominator. And a very common way to do it is actually just to multiply the two denominators together. So for instance, with this first one here, we could say, well, we multiply 5 times 8 and that gives us 40. And while that's a good method, it doesn't always give us the lowest common denominator. And while it's not incorrect to not have the lowest, it does make it easier. Calculations are a lot easier if you do find the lowest common denominator. So here's a little trick that is good to get into the habit of using to check before you add or subtract fractions whether or not multiplying the denominators together will give you the lowest common denominator. And it comes down to looking for shared factors. So if I look at 5 and 8, other than 1, they do not share a common factor. That is, there is no number that goes into both of them evenly. When that is the case, multiplying them together will give you the lowest common denominator. So looking at these examples here, there are 2 other examples where that is also the case. So with 3 and 11, we can just multiply 3 times 11 to get 33, and that will be the lowest common denominator. And the other one is with 7 and 11. We can multiply 7 by 11 to get 77, and that is the lowest common denominator. But if we look at these other examples here, 6 and 9, now they actually both share the factor of 3. So a good way to do that is say, let's take 6, divide that by 3, which is 2, then we can multiply it by the other denominator. So we have 2 times 9, which is 18. And that is actually the lowest common denominator. If we just multiplied them together, we would have got 54. And that can be more tricky some of our calculations can get a bit tricky there. So let's look at these ones, 4 and 14. Now, obviously, if you've got 2 even numbers, you know that 2 is always going to be a common factor. And that is the highest common factor here. So let's say, how many times does 2 go into 4? Well, it goes 2 times. So let's multiply 2 by 14, and that gives us 28. And again, if we just multiplied the denominators, we would have got 56. Now here's another one, 8 and 6. They also share the common factor of 2. So let's divide 8 by 2, and that gives us 4. Then we can multiply 4 by the other denominator, which is 6, and that gives us 24. Again, if we just multiplied them together, we would have got an answer of 48. If you do if you don't find the lowest common denominator, when you get your final answer, you will know that you will always be able to simplify it.